and welcome to Setting the Stage. I'm Isaac Shaker, and this is episode 71, Aaron Ryan and Dissonance/The End. Aaron is an author, and he wrote a series of books. Not a D&D player, but the books could make a really good setting for a D&D campaign, so we're going to look at it with that lens on it. I'm here with Aaron Ryan today as an author, a little bit of a different track than what we usually do for the Setting the Stage interviews. But hi, Aaron, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you, Isaac?
I'm doing good. I'm recovering from a broken toe right now, but it's close to being healed.
Oh man, that probably
Yeah,
poses a little bit of a challenge for walking.
yes. I was playing soccer and I did something to break it, and it's to the point where I can put weight on all the other toes, but not that one.
Wow. Yeah, toes are underrated. I'll just say that.
Yeah. So you're not an RPG player, which usually the people I'm talking to are, but you've made this really interesting world that I wanted to discuss and how it could be used for RPG games. So why don't you start off by just telling us about who you are, and then we can get into the books and the setting and all that stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, so I've been writing my entire life. Right now, I'm a dual career storyteller. So I'm a voiceover artist. I've been that way since. That sounds very weird to say. I've been that way. It's not like a behavior mannerism or anything. I've struggled with voiceovers since 2016, formally, informally since 1993, and then authoring since 1981. Grew up writing stories, and I love telling my own stories. So I get to tell other people's stories as a voiceover artist, but I get to tell my own as an author, and I really prefer the latter. Though I'm not experienced in lit RPG or RPG games, man, do I hear quite often about Dissonance, my alien invasion saga, the suggestion that it should be converted into lit RPG and should be, created, into a video game, adapted into a video game, and have some characters and things like that made out of it. So it's not the first time I've heard it. I've not ventured into that realm, but I'm going to say ... yet. So we'll see.
All right. Well, maybe I can convince you by the end of this interview.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. All right. So you've been exposed a little bit to RPGs, just like within their existence within like the American culture space, but never actually played them, never seen them played, nothing like that.
No, remember, if memory serves, I had some friends over when I was a kid, and it was under the context of some party or other, and I swear someone brought Dungeons and Dragons, because my mind I have no frame of reference. I have a 9 and 6-year-old sons, and so right now we think and watch Pixar, and time permitting, Pixar.
Yep.
So that's kind of the world, but I do remember dabbling in it briefly at some party when I was a kid.
Okay, so some exposure, but nothing that you remember at this point, or any
Nothing concrete. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Okay, well, right. So let's focus on the sort of genesis for. Well, I was interested in Dissonance and The End for the two series that you've written, and they're also sort of the same series for how you wrote them, but we'll get to that. What was the genesis for since Distance was your first one? What got that started for you?
Well, honestly, as a voiceover artist, the voiceover industry is really crumbling under the weight of AI, underbidding colleagues, lowballing clients, the economy, the SAG-AFTRA strike. It's just been one thing after another. But when OpenAI and ChatGPT really came to the fore in the spring of 2023, it introduced a sea change to the industry. And our income has substantially eroded. I am the voice of United Healthcare, for example. So that's, but for that, I don't know where we'd be. I don't know if we'd be living here right now. But
thank you. That's my health insurance company. So.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love United Healthcare. It's actually not ours because I qualify because of United Healthcare. I qualify for discounted SAG-AFTRA insurance. So I think it's a Regents plan. But anyway, but for being that voice, I don't know where we'd be. So I'm very grateful for that. The industry's been eroding, so that really caused me to pivot back to another love, which was authoring. That was in the fall of 2023. And I wanted to write. My favorite movie of all time is Aliens, the 1986 James Cameron Sigourney Weaver movie. I'm sure it
Great
is yours
movie.
as well. I'm sure it's everyone's, really, if we're really honest.
I
But
like The Thing for that genre, but it's still
oh,
Aliens is great.
I love The Thing. I love John Carpenter stuff. It's just amazing. Yeah, I was wanting to write a singular novel. It Before I knew it, ballooned into a trilogy, and then the trilogy demanded two prequels and a sequel. So before I knew it, I had a hexalogy on my hands. And Dissonance is, of everything I've written, I'm working on books number 39 and 40. Those aren't a continuation of the Dissonance saga, but I'm working on, novels number 39 and 40. Of everything I've written, Dissonance is my pride and joy. I put so much work, military research, and injecting a fair dose of verisimilitude into the saga. There's a lot of human heart and human struggle and survival beyond the outer context of an alien invasion. So it really has humanity at the core, and it just turned into something that I'm so deeply proud of. And it's done very well in the marketplace, and Volume One's been adapted for the screen and being pitched to streaming networks. So I'm pretty excited about that as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Did you write the screenplay adaptation yourself?
I collaborated with a screenwriter who's actually a Hollywood fellow, and he's accredited by Hollywood. He's won an award, or a few awards rather, for his own screenplays. He literally puts me 3 degrees away from James Cameron, which makes me super excited.
Ooh, cool.
Uh, yeah, the contest was put on by Gail Ann Hurd, who is Cameron's former wife, and he was very collaborative. He made some big changes I didn't actually approve of. They deviated from the story, and he undid them. He Control Z'd his way out of there, and that I felt was very honoring to the story. He's actually active in the Hollywood system, so he's out there pitching it right now, and I don't know how to pitch it. I don't know who to pitch it to, so thank
Right,
God
yeah.
for him. But yeah.
Yeah, it seems like to me like a great story for the screen, assuming that you can animate the aliens and make them look good. That's the
Yeah,
difficult
absolutely.
part.
Yeah.
Uh,
I found this artwork that's on the front cover of most of the novels in various iterations. It looks kind of like a space octopus. It definitely has tentacles, and what, like, stuff like that. Uh, I found it somewhere on ArtStation, and I asked the guy. I said, "Hey, this was created a long time ago. I know. Do you still have the artwork for this? Can I license it? Can I use it for my character to kind of help envision this creature?" And it was just so cool. It looks kind of like a Cthulhu creature,
yeah,
but it works. It's been he did have the artwork 12 years later. He created a bunch of iterations for me, and it's very scary what they can do. So they're a very tangible threat in the series.
yeah. I did want to ask you about the artwork later on, but yeah, we can. Let's get to it. We'll want to explain more about what the setting is first, I think,
Yeah.
because I thought that art was pretty cool.
Well, Dissonance is set. I like things. I mean, if you're going to ask me, hold a gun to my head and say, do you like Star Wars or Star Trek? I like the gritty nature and the realism, the tangible attainability of Star Wars over the antiseptic, vanilla, everything's clean, hygienic nature of Star Trek.
Yeah, like the falling apart Millennium Falcon versus the
I was
Enterprise,
just going to
which
say,
yeah, is always
yeah,
vacuumed and perfect.
I was just going to say that there's oil dripping out through the panelization of the Millennium Falcon. I like that. That's real. So what happens is the aliens, the Gorgons, we call them Gorgons, they invade in 2026. They attack 3 months later, and Volume One reality has been set 16 years after the invasion, and then Volume Two and Volume Three are a continuation of that into a trilogy, where we weaponize technology that the Gorgons brought. We're able to turn it around and eviscerate them and annihilate them. But it's really grounded in reality because it's right here on Earth. If you have an alien invasion that happens in 2026 and kills off 85% of humanity, well, you're not going to have a lot of forward momentum, innovation. We're going to all be kind of stuck in arrested development. So 2042 is going to look very similar to 2026. It'll just be overgrown, everywhere.
Yeah, I liked particularly how you were describing like specific streets in the it was Clarksville,
Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, I could look those up on Google Maps, be like, okay, yeah, that's where they are, and there's the subway that they're talking about that they're going into.
Yeah, absolutely. I did thread the character's way very carefully using Google aerial view and Google Street View. And so that was cool. I wanted to again ground it in reality and give it a dose of realism. One thing that was just absolutely surreal, I did take a trip, which I want to just apply the word pilgrimage to it. At Labor Day of last year, I went and I visited Clarksville. I'd never been there. And I visited Blue Spring, Kentucky. I mean, God bless the internet for providing aerial and street view, so you can be there and write your book. But
All right, I'd assume that you had lived there at some point because you're going into so much detail about it.
no, it just, I mean, again, God bless maps. I wanted to walk where my characters walked well after the series had been written. But it was just so surreal just to be there and know that this is where my character did this, and that's where they did that, and there's the church, and here's the room where so and so dies, and it was such a pilgrimage to go visit those very places that I had spent so much time in yet had never physically walked.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Is Hyde Park next for you?
Hyde Park might be next. Yeah, Hyde Park is. There's so many locations too. In the end, ranges all over.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, that would be very cool. I'd love to visit Washington D.C. I've never actually been there. And the end series basically escalates to some confrontations that are very important episodes that are going to happen in Washington D.C. in the end. So I guess I need to go there too.
Right. So Dissonance is about like an alien invasion, and the aliens are Gorgons, is what their name is,
Mhm.
which is because they petrify people, not literally turning them to stone within the way that D&D thinks of it, but just in sort of a more psychic way. Do you want to talk more about them and their existence?
Yeah, I would love to. The Gorgons were something that I did not straight away arrive at. When I was sculpting this story, I came up with something that resembled a little bit too much of a cross between Nazgul and Dementors. And done that. Both of those have been done, and they've been treaded and retreaded and hashed and rehashed. I needed something that was unique, that was still a very tangible threat, but I did need it to be flesh and bone. So they were called druids originally, and then I changed the name when I discovered what I was really afraid of. That brought me back to a time in, I believe, 1986, when I was just a little guy. Actually, sorry, 1981, and I was just a little guy watching the claymation stop motion photography version of the Clash of the Titans movie, 1981.
Okay.
And I love that movie. I mean, in fan fiction, it's a cult favorite. That movie has a very stop motion version of Medusa, and it terrified me as a kid. I remember running out of the room when she zeroes one of Perseus's compatriots who had fallen and dares to look back. I remember running out of the room when they do an extreme close up of her face, her eyes light up green. There's this
Oh
high
yeah, I've seen
dissonant
that.
shriek. Yeah, that terrified me. And so I thought, why not inject that into these creatures? And yes, it's a little bit like a an Enderman, in some respects, but I thought this is something, an Enderman isn't going to eat you. These Gorgons will petrify you and then eat you. And you're right, they don't turn you to stone, but it's a telepathic paralytic whereby you are absolutely frozen for all time. You'll never move again. And they're going to eat you at your leisure while you feel every single bite. So if that's not terrifying, I don't know what is.
Right. Yeah. And I've read the first book well, I listened to it because you did the voice narration for it, which really brilliant move using your skills there. It makes it so much more accessible for people.
Yeah, thank you. That was something I did not want to do. I don't like doing audiobooks. They take way too long and they pay way too little. But I would feel so remiss if I had outsourced my beloved story to someone who I desperately wanted them to bring it to life, and they did a terrible job. They did it a huge disservice. So I had to do the audiobooks, and I've subsequently done all of them.
I was curious about that more for how it felt to like play a character that's unlike yourself. Because from my reading of Dissonance, Shipley is just a huge asshole at the start of the book. So how did that feel to act that character?
Well, there are some things that I do mirror and that do mirror me. I am a cynic. Cameron Jet Shipley, his nickname is Jet. Definitely a cynic. He's been hardened through years of living underground, hiding from Gorgons, trying to wage war and living in a constant state of frenetic trepidation because he's on patrols almost every day or every other day where he's got to go to the surface from his blockade, which is a series of defense network um, armored underground locations or bunkers. And, he's lived this life. So he is hardened. He is a cynic. Here wanders in these new characters into his blockade, which he thinks he's the top dog. And, what are these guys doing and what do they want? One guy is a little bossy and Jet doesn't like that. So he's got to go on a growth journey. And I believe every protagonist in every story needs to change. They need to be pushed. They need to be sculpted by their circumstances. And that reveals a lot of their character. When you see, if you want to see what's inside a sponge, you squeeze it, right? That's the type of thing that you need to do with your characters is squeeze them and see what happens. How do they react at the beginning of the saga? And how do they react at the end? And is there a change there?
Yeah, I mean that's part of like the hero's journey story. Like they go through a challenge, then they have to like the cave where they have to consider themselves and then come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a character, I love this phrase, and I forget who the author is, but he's a Russian author, and he said, one of your goals, in fact, your main goal should be to get your protagonist up a tree, stranded, and throw rocks at them. And that really, how the character is going to maneuver his way through that circumstance. Is he going to sit and whine? Is he going to rail at you? Is he going to, scream profanities and call for help? Is he going to jump down and brave the storm of these rocks being hurled at him and fight his way to freedom? That really is a revelatory process that you'll see in most books, and I think you need to see in most books.
Yeah, for sure. Something that I was curious about for Dissonance, at least for the first book, is I felt like it was coming towards like Jet experiencing a crisis of faith, but it seemed like it didn't really get there within the first book. Does that come later on in the series?
Yeah, absolutely. Jet is going on a crisis of faith. There is something very, very horrendous that happens in book one, followed by other things that are horrendous in book one.
Yeah.
And he's facing betrayal. He's facing lies. He's facing a systematic dismantling of everything that he's known. He's 23 years old. But 18 years of his life have been lived underground, and all he's ever known is trying to trust the people that he's been serving with and protecting. So when this erosion of trust happens, that's when, and that happens, 7 chapters into the book, this slow erosion of trust. I won't say what it is, obviously, because I don't want to spoil it, but
Yeah.
Something happens in the book that is colossal in his world, rocks his world, and he is grieving, he is betrayed, he is having to see things differently, and his eyes are slowly being opened that all this time something much bigger has been going on that he's not been briefed about. So that cynicism grows, that mistrust grows, and mistrust demands an inquest. Cynicism demands a resolution to trust. So by the end of book 3, you see him slowly making his way to both of those. But it does take a saga to do that because he is boneheaded.
Gotcha. Yeah. It did feel like, he's surrounded by all these faithful characters and he's like this irreverent person that doesn't really care. So I could see that you were going in that direction. And yeah, you bring in a good point. It's not just about like his faith in God, but also his faith in the people around him. Like that last chapter is just like this huge, like bombshell after bombshell for what's going on with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a character that he has looked to as a father. who he's been serving with in the blockade, and there's just some new truths that come to light. You understand, of course, that this person has also just been doing what he's been told, So he's a patsy in some respects, and so it really isn't his fault. But Jet initially wants to blame it on him, of course, and he wants blood. And so he's got to actually move in trust, and if he wants revenge, he's got to take revenge on the right people, and there really is no right revenge. So he's got some difficult choices to make for sure.
Yeah, yep. We skipped over something a little bit earlier where I mentioned I wanted to talk about the art for the cover compared to the book description, where the art for the cover has all these like tentacles and this sort of faceless mouth kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember you giving a concrete description for the Gorgons within the book for what they looked like.
Yeah, I didn't want to actually. I love the way Tolkien approaches his novels. He was very adamantly opposed to a cinematic adaptation of his novels because, in his mind, the appearance, the traits, the fine-tune, mechanism of how this person operates in real life should really reside in the purview of the reader. And so, to project Ian McKellen upon Gandalf in the mind of the reader, he felt was unfair. If the reader wants Gandalf to be, looking and acting like Shirley Temple, that's up to the reader. So for those of you who don't know who Shirley Temple is, that just dated myself. Just Google it. But completely opposite from what Gandalf looks like.
Yes, definitely.
I wanted to proceed along the same wavelength, and that was that the Gorgons should be somewhat ethereal, somewhat mysterious. We fear what we don't know. And so the further you define something, the further you explain it and describe it, then that mystery gets whittled down to nothing. There's no more mystery because you know it perfectly. And so when you have no more mystery, then you start having no more fear of it. And I really wanted that fear to be preserved. So ultimately, you don't see much of a description of them in Volume 1, but there is a very stark scene in Volume 2 where you get a much, much more precise description of what they are. In fact, if you were to read the series in chronological order, starting with Dissonance Volume 0 Revelation, which is the first prequel, they are described because they drift down through the clouds. And so, they are described there. There's still a huge amount of fear because what are these millions of things that are now in our skies? And they're not moving. They're hanging there ominously for 3 months. If that, that's a fearful environment. So
yeah, for sure.
they are described though in Volume 1. So you get to kind of figure out what they look like early on.
So they have very strong hearing and smell, is what you described.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's trying to be quiet when they're going out, which seemed very similar to A Quiet Place in that series, because they have alien monsters that show up and have very sensitive hearing. Don't fly, so maybe not as threatening as the Gorgons. But did you take some inspiration from that, or were this more your own thing?
No, I did. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, isn't that true of any predator that you're trying to evade? You are trying to tiptoe around them. You're trying to be careful. You're trying to be quiet so as not to attract attention to yourself. Most predators, and that's what these Gorgons are, they're just predators from space. Most predators have a refined sense of smell, a sense of detection. That's what makes them a predator. And so we don't predate, really as humans. We don't operate that way. So they've allowed, whether it's evolution or it's creation, they've had that refined sense or senses perfected over all these years. So yeah, whether it's a death angel from A Quiet Place, whether it's a Gorgon, whether it's a lion in the Serengeti, you're going to be quiet. You're going to stay downwind. You're going to
good point.
You're going to be very, very careful whittling your way around them. Now, that said, yes, I was inspired by A Quiet Place, but the thing that I as much as I love The Quiet Place, and I really do, I think it's a bizarre story because they're not here to consume; they're simply here to destroy. They are simply here to kill. I've never once seen anything in any of the movies that the Death Angels harvest you and eat you. Aliens, the xenomorphs, obviously they will harvest you and they'll imprison you and they'll use you to reproduce their young. Sometimes they'll eat you, but you don't see that in A Quiet Place. They're just simply there to wreak havoc and destroy. So that's again where I differ. Mine are definitely there to eat.
Yeah, I felt like there were some more complicated reasons that could show up later on in this series. I haven't gotten to them, and I don't want to spoil them either, but largely because they show up and then just hover for 3 months, that indicates some level of intelligence beyond animal. Like a predator animal would show up and would just start hunting. It wouldn't wait for all of its friends to show up.
Correct. You are absolutely right. There is a level of intelligence there that you slowly find out as you read through Dissonance. It is not simply about food. Their attack, their appearance, and then their subsequent attack 3 months later, all coordinated. And this is where I actually drew a little bit of inspiration from Independence Day as well. The ships hovered there for a while. It wasn't 3 months, but they were operating on a countdown. And so were the Gorgons. They did not arrive in crafts or drones or ships or anything like that. But they were definitely nefarious and scheming as far as how they did all this, because they enter the atmosphere, they slowly descend, they fan out, they take up position, and they wait there for 90 days until all of the Gorgons are in place. That is a higher level of intelligence. Their attack is coordinated at the same time, simultaneous all over the world. That is a higher level of intelligence. And they're not here just to eat. They're also here to steal our water. And you find that out as you read the book. Nothing, spoilerish about that. Earth is loaded with resources. That's what makes it an attractive target. But you find that out as well. They are here for our water, also a higher level of intelligence. So yeah, they're not just some simple predator.
Yeah, to me, my interpretation was that they're more like some bioweapon that was sent at Earth for whatever reason. It gets revealed later on in the series that it's the water, but which also explains why they're like there's so many more Gorgons around water places. That's explained very early on. And my feeling was as an RPG, it almost is more fun to leave like the reason why they're there unstated, because then like you're an author, so you're writing your own story about what's happening, but within a game, like the people that are playing it want to write their own story about what's happening, so they could come up with their own explanation that fits what they want.
Right. Yeah, totally. So it was a challenge writing this series because I didn't have all the details in place when I first started, because I'm a pantser. A pantser is a style of writer that flies by the seat of their pants. They write very organically as it comes to them. Whereas a planner or a plotter is somebody who, dots all their I's and crosses all their T's, and they've got everything all mapped out from the beginning. And now we're going to start. Now that I have all the details in place, there's nothing wrong with either, and there certainly isn't anything wrong with the planner or the plotter style, because you're probably going to have a little bit more of a watertight story when you do it that way, or an airtight story. I like to write organically. So when I wrote Volume 1, which was the first one I wrote, I didn't have some of the details, of the Gorgons in place. But what it does do is when you write Volume 1 and you know that they're here to eat, and you know that they're here to steal the water, and you know they're intelligent, then and Jet ruminates back, 16 years prior to the invasion. I know all of these things that I can then fill in, because if Jet remembers this in Volume 1 and I've written it out, then for darn sure I have to put that in the prequel, that thing that he just remembered.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I had this bullet list of all these things that Jet remembers in Volume 1 that help perfectly flesh out the prequel for me in that regard. The Gorgons grew as I wrote. The characters grew as I wrote. I grew as I wrote, and I love it that way.
Yeah, I could definitely tell reading the end that you had. It's just a much more complex narrative in the end, because you have 3 point of view characters and like swapping between them and having different voices for each of them. compared to Dissonance, where it's just all from Jet's point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you go into Dissonance Volume Uprising, which is the second prequel, which is a volume I was not intending to write, but I created a faux pas with Volume 0 starting in 2026 and ending in 2037. Well, Volume 1 starts in 2042. So there's a 5-year gap of like, well, what happened? What happened? That's 5 years is a huge chunk. So I picked that up with Volume Uprising, and Volume Uprising takes the perspective of 4 different protagonists. So you get to bounce back and forth between the 2 of them, the 4 of them rather, and learn, a little bit of their origin stories as well. So there's 4 first-person perspectives in that one. That was a challenge to write.
Yeah, definitely. I'm doing National Novel Writing Month. It's November when we're recording this, and switching perspectives is difficult.
Yeah, it's I was first clued into that by Marie Lu in the Legend series, and I loved what she did. I loved how she handled vacillating between these characters. Granted, it's all encapsulated within a single chapter for this person, and then you switch to the next chapter, and then that is encapsulating the other person's perspective. But I've only ever seen that from 2 perspectives, a dual first person. And so to write Volume Uprising from 4, and to have them all be cohesive, to have them all be correct as far as the running timeline, it was a fun challenge. It's ended up being my favorite book in the 6-book saga, because there's so much backstory. One of my favorite chapters in any book is in Lord of the Rings, and there's 2 chapters. One is the Shadow of the Past, where Gandalf is bringing Frodo up to speed on Gollum and the hunt for Gollum and the 3 rings when they were forged and blah blah blah.
Near the start, yep.
Yeah, I love that chapter. And then I also love the Council of Elrond, where the Council of Elrond, there's a huge backstory brought in that explains everything that led up to today. And oh boy, I love those. I don't know why I love those narratives so much, but I love finding out the backstory of what led you up to now.
Well, you mentioned you were a pantser for how you write, and I feel like I could have predicted that just based off of the pace of your writing, because you finished the entirety of Dissonance was published within like 1 year. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm very proud of that. Yeah.
It's like a book every 2 months. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that there's a longer, like you're not writing and then boom, it goes out. There's like an editing process and everything. So it's more like maybe a 6-month thing, but it means like as you're writing something, you're also editing the previous book and working with publishers and all of that. What was that experience like?
It's absolutely correct. There's overlap. So when you are working on your new novel, the previous novel is with the editor. So yeah, absolutely. It just there's that overlap that's inevitable, because if you're working on something, you're playing leapfrog with the editor who's working on your previous work. So you kind of have this ping ponging. And then, that one's ready. Then you come back and you're marketing that one while you're working on your new novel, which you're about to give to your editor. So it's a constant kind of shuffling the pieces. But yeah,
I guess you're still doing that, actually.
I am. Yeah. We'll see with voiceovers. Again, the industry is just really eroding. It's not what it once was. And I want to provide for my family. And I think God has really made clear to me that my calling is to be a storyteller. The best way to be a storyteller for me is to be a writer, an author. And so I have really, really pushed hard to make something of myself as an author. So these books, there's an urgency present in them just by virtue of the context that they're set. An alien invasion and 85% of humanity has been killed off. Things are pretty urgent. Things are pretty dire. Well, my voiceover career is urgent and dire. So art imitates life, right? So I've actually really pushed hard to build up this authoring career on the sidelines while the voiceover industry continues. I keep saying industry, while the voiceover career continues to fade.
So you can say industry there too if you want. I think it's an accurate representation of what's happening.
Yeah,
I've definitely heard other people complain about it.
so many creative industries are just being besieged. But
Yeah.
that's really why I've been pressed on by urgency is I've got to get these done and out there, and I want them to succeed and get them into the hands of people who will love these stories and grow with them. I love Dissonance. I just finished reading through it again, and it's a weighty saga. It's filled with a lot of loss and a lot of gain. The victories are profound. The tragedies are enormous, and they have high stakes on the protagonists in each of the novels. But it is hands down the best thing I've ever written.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't read your entire works, but yeah, it's very good. You definitely have something to be proud of with it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. For the blockades, and this is more of a like nitty gritty question of how are they getting like food and water and electricity and presumably fuel to run generators and all that stuff? How is that all being brought into the blockade?
Yeah, so this is where my knowledge fails me, and I needed to reach out to people who were more knowledgeable in that subject. You've got hydroponic farms underground. You've got hydroponic farms which are growing vegetables and grains and things like that. You do have occasionally up above ground. Granted, if 85% of humanity and all organic life has been, or I mean, most of organic life has been killed off, then the pickings are rare. They're scarce.
Right.
But occasionally you're going to find bunnies and rabbits, that are below ground creatures. They tunnel, and so they find their way into the blockades. You've got the occasional deer that has survived, and so that is being harvested, hunted and harvested. The Gorgons are not everywhere. You always have to be very wary of where you are because they can pounce on you at any moment. Fear is around every corner. But they also have MREs, meals ready to eat, which are ration meals, and everyone's tired of them. It's kind of like in the Matrix where you have this slop that the guys are tired of aboard the Nebuchadnezzar. This bowl of snot that I think
Yeah. I feel like MREs are a bit better than that, but yeah.
probably a bit better. Yeah, they were loaded to the gills with those, and the civilian population in a blockade is usually around 50 people. Granted, for 16 years, that's a lot of food to provide for a lot of meals for a lot of people, and more come, and then you lose some people on recon to Gorgons. So they're vast. They were tunneled out by Big Bertha drills. After the Gorgons came, someone had the prescience in order to say, "Hey, if should these things prove to be nefarious, we're going to need a backup plan." And so that's where these DN defense network blockades were constructed. There's 600 of them all over the world, tunneled out by Big Bertha drills, equipped with machine gun towers, 8 of them in a halo, above the berm of the blockade.
Mhm.
Rounds after rounds after rounds, but you have to also remember that on these recon patrols that the military conducts every single day, they're going out and they are scavenging, they are foraging for leftover food, ammo, survivors, anything that they can use to, replenish their blockade. There isn't much, but they take what they can find.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that kind of answers my question. That it's much bigger underground than I was imagining. Because I was imagining kind of like maybe 2 basement levels or something. But if there's just like this enormous hydroponic farm situation underneath, then that can work.
Yep, exactly.
And yeah, there's bound to be tons of gasoline left over after this because there'd just be like cars everywhere that are full, gas stations that have gas. So
Right.
I can see that working.
Well, I mean, Volume 3 is the most militaristic of the 3 novels, and I wanted it to be that way because everything needed to kind of continue to go on this fever pitch incline towards a cataclysmic resolution for basically the underground movement that's in opposition to the primary antagonist of the series. So I'm not going to spoil who that is, but um, it's very militaristic as it grows, and it just grows in intensity. And so one of the questions is raised because Jet flies in an F-15 Eagle formation, but they're all flying together, and they are landing on the USS Harry S. Truman out aboard the Atlantic because they are going to attack something. I won't say what it is. And spoiler. And the question is raised, what about how do you have fuel? I thought refineries needed to be in operation in order to keep, crude oil refined, for fuel. And one of the guys, one of the petty officers aboard the Harry S. Truman, simply utters the line, "Hey man, that's above my pay grade. I don't know." And that's a maybe an easy way out. I took the escape hatch there. Um, you don't need to explain everything. It just needs to be. It needs to maybe strain credulity a little bit, but be even remotely believable. All this time, someone has been running around in the dark, eking out an existence in the shadows, hiding, flitting from shadow to shadow, and keeping the lights on, keeping power running. Um, Humans survive, and that's a testament to humanity. Uh, so, how does oil get processed and used or how does fuel get processed and used from crude oil? You don't know, but you do know that people will survive, and they'll do whatever they need to survive.
Yeah. And I actually like that answer a lot, where you have a character ask the question and then someone else says, I don't know, it's above my pay grade. Like, that's a good answer because it at least acknowledges the existence of there needing to be a solution, but you don't need to actually provide it. Like, I mean, it's 15 years in the future. Maybe there was some new technology that was discovered at some point, because there is still 15% of the population that survived and is working on solutions to these problems that we don't necessarily know now as our technology level.
Yeah, absolutely. By addressing it, by saying, "Hey, I'm cognizant that this is a question that some people will have," you do two things. You eliminate the plot hole because, well, how are these people going to survive? And how do you have oil? And how do you have, fuel? You eliminate that plot hole because it is being discussed, and someone found a way is the illusion that you take away from that conversation. But the other thing is you really take the Fazzini sting out of it all. He can no longer say inconceivable. He can't say that anymore because survival is conceivable. It is conceivable that we have found a way, that we are continually finding a way in the shadow of the Gorgons. While they own the surface, we own the underground, and we are doing everything we need to survive. So, sorry, Fazzini.
I was also curious about the Gorgons and their capability, because they're portrayed as like this really menacing thing. And then near the end of well, I guess it's not near the end, but there's a climax in the first book where Jet is able to deal with a whole bunch of them.
Yep.
Not at the same time, like one by one, but still. And it seems like compared to the threat they posed previously, one person who just has a rifle, basically, being able to handle so many of them, it seems like there's some power mismatch. Like, normally like the story has portrayed them up to that point as much more dangerous than they are in that encounter. Mm-hmm. And I know there's reasons for that are explained, but I was curious about like your trying to maintain consistency for their threat level throughout the series.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question and a fair question as well. Again, going back to the fear aspect, fear magnifies an enemy. We fear what we don't know. And so we haven't sat down with a Gorgon for an interview to ask them, what they're like and they don't like, and, their favorite holiday, and, what are they afraid of? We haven't had that luxury, nor will we ever have a luxury like that to really get inside their head. So because of that lack of knowledge, we fear them more than we probably should. Granted, they have a tremendous offensive weapon against us, and that is their telepathic paralytic. But as you probably read, there has been technology that's been manufactured in the meanwhile as we've been underground, and it is a borosilicate glass mask solution that Lieutenant Allison Trudy and others at the Alpharetta blockade DN-282 have invented, and the technology repels the Gorgon signal to a certain degree. You're going to still feel nauseous if you're face-to-face with a Gorgon and you have one of these masks on. you're going to still feel that wave of nausea coming at you. But Jet is equipped with one of those masks when he goes all Rambo and goes all out and kills like 38 Gorgons. He's had enough, and he needed to be pushed to that brink and go, I'm not losing anybody else. Darn it, this is it. He resolves not to lose any more lives, and he resolves furthermore, even more importantly, he resolves not to be afraid. And you find him communicating that to Trudy and Foxy and Joe Bassett and Vera in the church. He's trying to impart that precious truth to them. Don't be afraid. They're just creatures. They're flesh and blood. They are fast, yes. They are deadly, yes. But Jet goes all out, and he's equipped with all of this weaponry in order to, and a powerful defense in that mask, in order to just take all of them out. The number one rule is you just don't look.
Right.
The number two rule is you run from a Gorgon, almost like an agent in the Matrix. You don't fight, you run. But he is tired of running, just like Neo. He's tired of running, and sooner or later, someone has to face them, just as Morpheus said. So everyone else, that fight wasn't for Jet's benefit in the church. That slaughter of the Gorgons was not for Jet's benefit. It was for every other human alive to see that it could be done, and for them to take hope from it.
Yeah, I think you touch on that a little bit with the last chapter for like what the intentions were for that mission, which we don't want to fully get into, but yeah, I definitely see that.
Powerful segue. And if you go on and read Volume 2, Jet is going to arrive in another blockade, and he's going to be regaled as a hero because word will spread. It's almost like William Wallace in Braveheart, where like William Wallace killed 50 men, 50, if it was one. And everyone is like, his reputation is preceding him now as the guy. That's the guy. No, he killed like 38 Gorgons. I heard it was 312, and the rumor starts and people get all excited. They're filled with hope. They need that. It's Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games as well.
Another component of that is the speed for the Gorgons, where you describe them as being faster than jets, so like Mach 5. We don't need a number on it, but in that same encounter, it seems like that speed requires a sort of wind up that you can anticipate and react to. Does that maintain its consistency throughout the series as well?
Yes, it does. Almost, if you look at it like a Juggernaut from X-Men, he builds up speed slowly, but once he gets going to this nominal speed that he's going to maintain, he's unstoppable. And so as they have pursued F-35s and F-22s, granted, I probably should have been a little bit more clear. Not all of them are going to be able to do that. Some are older. Some Gorgons are older than others. Some are fitter than others. Some are younger than others. Some have more, agility. They're as different as we are from people in the South or people in Europe or people in Asia. There are various ethnicities of Gorgons, and you also find in Volume 2 and beyond that there are various iterations of Gorgons. The Berserker Gorgon you find in Volume 1 is not a true Gorgon. It is a chemically engineered Gorgon, and that comes from human interference to try to get that Gorgon, that Berserker Gorgon, to kill all the other Gorgons as like a Trojan horse.
Yeah, I mean, we do similar types of genetic experiments like today with mosquitoes, so I totally get that.
Yeah, yes, but that what's the word? The exponential rate of climb in the speed of the Gorgons as they accelerate and accelerate and accelerate. It's the same thing that we have when you build momentum. They're going to just be able to go faster and faster and faster. I doubt that I ever had it in my brain that they would approach Superman spinning around the Earth and turning back time speed. But, that would be like a super Gorgon. And I don't know that I ever had that in my brain. That would be weird.
Well, I think there is an element of that for a possible explanation for their interstellar travel, where they can just keep going faster if there's no resistance in space, and if they don't require air to move around. They can just keep accelerating until they're going whatever speed they need to get.
Yes, however, they did arrive in a craft. There is a craft out there, and that craft, and you find that out from volume 2, I believe. I don't know that it's mentioned necessarily in volume 1, but volume 2, you do find that there is a mothership that has been hovering outside the atmosphere and in the mesosphere all this time, and you definitely find that out in Dissonance Volume 0 Revelation. So that little allusion I made earlier toward Jet and the others flying out in a formation, a military jet formation over the Atlantic, they are going out there to attack something. There's an alien ship out there over the Atlantic, and so that's why they're heading out there.
Gotcha. So looking at this from an RPG point of view, for like not rocket-propelled grenade, but from role-playing game, the idea for having like, okay, there's a game master who plays all of the non-player characters, like the people at the base and the Gorgons and anybody they meet while they're out on patrol, and then presumably the players are playing the people going out on patrol. That's how I would assume it. So they're playing Jet, Rut, Bassett, Trudy, and each of them gets to have their own character. But there's another component where that's different from a book compared to a role-playing game, where you want to have each of those characters be able to contribute and have their own voice and like story power that's roughly equivalent, so no one feels like left out when they're experiencing the game. How do you imagine making those changes if it were to become a role-playing game?
That would be really interesting, and this is undiscovered country for me. So many of these questions, I'll be kind of, I don't know. I'll be as articulate as possible when I say, I don't know. Yeah, ultimately, if you can choose different characters, they all have their different traits, and I tend to think of it in along the lines of when I bought Transformers toys, and they still do this. They have a meter on the back of each package. And those packages would come with a film, a thin strip of red film that you could lay over that meter, and that overlay would reveal a blue line signifying a graph that would plot this character's strength and agility and endurance, intelligence, all those different things. And so the characters would need to be delineated with such metrics. In order to specify who is who and who's the most powerful and who's going to kick the most butt. If you have a Joe Bassett in there, this is a character that Jet immediately distrusts. His cynicism kicks into overdrive when Staff Sergeant Joe Bassett from Alpharetta is now trying to it becomes a pissing contest, if you excuse the expression.
No, it's in the book, man.
Yeah. That's what it becomes. And so Jet has to relinquish some territory, and he is challenged to move in trust. Well, Staff Sergeant Joe Bassett is, if there was going to be a meter for him that would talk about like integrity, he would be off the charts. Bassett would be off the charts. He is a hero, and he's a man's man. And that's all I'll say, because I don't want to spoil anything else in the series. Mm-hmm. He's amazing.
I mean, you get that sense from like immediately, I think, from how you've written it, to be honest.
Yeah, very worthy character. Jet is the hero of the trilogy, for sure. So I think people would identify with Jet's cynicism. They would identify with his pent-up desire to strike back at the enemy, his endurance. For crying out loud, he gets impaled at one point in the bathroom with Vera by a Gorgon claw. He gets a big scratch in the opening pages of Volume 1 as he's fleeing from Gorgons with Ruddy. And so, he's got a wound there. In Volume 3, he shoots himself in the leg on accident. And so, he's trying to get away from these Gorgons, and you don't always do everything right. And I think that's what makes him attainable.
I think what you said about like having their sort of different areas of expertise is definitely how I would solve that problem for a role-playing game, where like Jet has the power of violence sort of and Trudy has the power of science, and Bassett has the power of leadership, and Rut maybe has the power of like getting supplies for what they need or something like that.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent way to put it. Excellent way to put it.
Yeah.
A strength meter is maybe what Jet would have. I mean, he's a young, virile, agile, in shape, a force to be reckoned with guy. Young military sergeant with incredible speed. He and his brother run very fast. And so that helps them. Trudy would be way up there on the intelligence scale for sure. Bassett would be up there on the leadership scale for sure. You would have those types of metrics that just would be accurate to the character. Yeah.
Mhm. I think one issue with adapting the book to a role playing game is how deadly the monsters are. A lot of role playing games want to have more like long campaigns where you kind of stick with the same characters for a long period. But with how menacing the Gorgons are, you have to adapt your expectations to sort of a shorter story where you're more okay with your character dying and being replaced by someone else if you want to keep playing.
Right.
Which does happen in the book. Frankly, there's in book one, there's like at least a dozen people that die or something like that. Maybe not a dozen, but
no, not a dozen, but one is exceptionally painful. And that is it's central to the story. But there's other people. An extraneous character, Shannon Hickey, was killed in volume Up, Rising. Her death is addressed in the beginning of, the fact that she's missing is addressed in the beginning of Dissonance Volume 1 Reality. And then she is memorialized at a memorial at the end of Volume 1 Reality because she did in fact die. You never know her. You never came to know her really. So that loss isn't quite as felt. But one of the things that I loved, as hard as it is to play God as an author, a death of a beloved character can never be cavalier. It absolutely always has to serve as a catalyst for something. It can't, their lives can't just be bandied around loosely, and they're not throwaways, any of them, especially when they're part of the 15% remaining contingent of human survivals. You don't kill them off cavalierly. So, but in order to show, as you mentioned, the true deadly nature of the Gorgons, then like Game of Thrones, you have to learn that no one is safe. No one is safe from these things. They really are that terrifying and deadly. And God forbid they ever should get inside a blockade. And you find out that one does in Volume 0 Revelation. And you find out that another one does in Volume 0 Revelation in a different blockade. They are terrible, terrible. And how do you fight an enemy that you can't even look at? How do you point and shoot at an enemy you can't even look at? They don't have masks yet. So you're crippled and handcuffed from the start. Good luck.
I think touching on that point of like having to like be an author for the story, there's two general types of role-playing games. One of them is like more numbers focused, where like I'm this strong and this fast, and the Gorgon is that strong and that fast, and then we roll some dice, and I got a lower number than the Gorgon, so it hit me, and then I take 5 points of damage, and that's all I can take, so then I'm dead. So that's the numbers style. The other style is more about like the story you want to tell. So there's still those same factors of like speed, strength, and rolling dice and all of that. But instead of it being the Gorgon hit me and I'm dead, it's more like the Gorgon hit me and now there is a consequence. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a consequence that's like I broke my arm. It could be more along the lines of it hits me and I am able to shoot it with my rifle as it comes up. But then I suffer a condition like I'm consumed with bloodlust, just like Jet is in the church, where he just has to go and deal with the rest of them because he's in that feeling and emotion.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that the second one appeals to you more as an author.
I think that there's an argument to be made for if you are playing this kind of game and the character has achieved so much, it's all based on achievements, the character has achieved so much thus far, then you have an overall stamina rank. And so that stamina rank determines how well you would face off against a Gorgon. And whether or not you have a mask is another thing too. But, if you
Yeah, for
have
sure.
the ability to, in the preliminary throes of this captive stare that you find yourself in with a Gorgon, are you able to wrest yourself away? Are you able to wrench control of your own eyes and mind away from the Gorgon? And that's based on your overall stamina meter, based on how well you've been doing up until then. You could have something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be a great thing to include for sure.
Yeah. Make it so. Let's do this game thing.
I definitely think there's some games that could be adapted for this. There's a set of games called Powered by the Apocalypse that are very easy to adapt to different stories. And I'm probably not the person to do it, but I could see it being done.
Yeah, it'd be very cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know the first step of how to do that, but I welcome to ideas or suggestions for who to talk to, because that would be fun.
Yeah, I could see if I know anybody that would be interested. It's cool stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about for Dissonance? Because I wanted to move to the end as well.
Well, Dissonance is my heart and soul of the 39 books. I'm working on book number 39 right now that I've written. This saga, and I'm talking about the saga as a whole, not just Volume 1 reality.
Mm.
It is just so much who I am. Jet is a cynic. I'm a cynic. Volume 0, when you read the book from his dad Andrew's perspective, and you come to find out more about his brother Ruddy and his sister Sissy, Adeline, and his mom Melissa. I channeled a lot of our own family into that family. Now, we don't have a daughter, so, Sissy was on her own. But I just, what kills me, and this is always going to be the case, is that Dissonance Volume 0 does not fare very well in the review ecosphere out there, because people, they read Alien Invasion and they want the aliens to show up right away, and they want them to attack right away, and they want there to be bloodshed and grisly this and that and macabre everywhere. Well, that's not how I write, and that's not how any good writer writes. Is you want story first. You want to build the tension with a slow burn of something is coming and you know it, and you're looking for those signs. Satellite disruption, number 1. Cellular signal spotty, number 2. Dog's ears bleeding, number 3. Suddenly,
Right.
it's sporadic, but it's abrupt and like came out of nowhere. And so I do get negative reviews from time to time on Volume 0 Revelation, because people don't really understand that necessity of a slow burn, especially when you've got 5 more novels to read after this one. If I don't establish this family and this primary character, you won't care about them. You won't. If you don't know much about the family or the people who are at the center of the story, and that's the Shipley family, then you're not going to care. Let the aliens eat them, and that's not a human story anymore.
I think there's always often like a weird place for prequels as well, because are you writing them for someone who's just coming into the series, or are you writing them for people who've already read the original book and the sequels that you've written? And you're going to have a different audience that expects different things from the books in those cases.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And there's the books are completely different tones. When I'm out at vendor market selling books, people ask, well, which one do I start with? I want to buy a book, but do I start with Dissonance Volume 1 Reality, or do I start with Dissonance Volume 0 Revelation? Chronologically, Revelation starts the entire hexalogy. Volume 1 is 3 volumes in, but it is the first one that I wrote. And Jet in Volume 1 is going to reflect back 16 years prior to when the Gorgons came. So you're not going to miss anything. You'll know what happened. He'll have flashbacks and things like that. But I often segregate it by saying, if you want to start the series with action, start with reality. If you want to start it with story, then start with Revelation. And they just make their choice from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's hard to even come up with an answer that I feel works for different a different, like a general answer for that within like, oh, this is how you do it for every series. Like it's going to vary from series to series with prequels for how you address them.
Yeah. They all have different tones. They all need to be standalones in a certain respect. They all need to be distinguished from each other because each book should have its own tone and flavor. Each book should have its own share of gains and losses and different stories that are inherent to that book from chapter one to the end. They all need to stand apart to a certain respect.
Yeah, definitely. All right, you ready to talk about the end, the sequel series?
Let's do it.
All right, yeah. So the end is set like 60 years after the Gorgon series, Dissonance. So it's set in like 2113, I think is when the series starts.
Correct.
And it's in a similar situation where there's been a second apocalyptic event that's affected everything, and sort of more than one, to be honest. The end also is more an explicit like Christian story. Like I felt like Dissonance was more like it has Christian elements in it because it's set in America, and you should have those because there's a lot of Christians in America. Just from a like accurate perspective, but I would describe the end as much more explicitly like Christian fiction instead of just a fiction piece.
Absolutely. I would say Dissonance is covertly Christian. The end is overtly Christian.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So what was your like process for coming up with the story and including all of these different elements that you were thinking of for including your faith in the book?
Well, I love the question. Frankly, I'm a Christian, so I'm going to put that out there from the start and just say to write a series like Dissonance, which has moderate profanity, which has some barbarism, some macabre attacks by aliens. Granted, I'm a Christian, but I'm also a human, and I'm interested in sci-fi. I always have been. I will never use the F-bomb. There's no need. I will never have my characters utter in profanity GD or JC and take the Lord's name in vain. I won't do that. I'm never going to have graphic sex, bullying, drugs, any of that. I just don't need it, and my readers don't need it. Nonetheless, I was very convicted at finishing Volume 1 Reality and the rest of them in the entire hexalogy. I was convicted about having used profanity on occasion, or any of the other elements that some people might find objectionable. One of my a close family friend once said they're not interested in reading Dissonance because the aliens remind them of demons. And I'm going, okay, well, I mean,
Well, they're the bad guys. I mean, is that a problem?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's taking it one step too far. They're not of the spiritual realm. They don't know God. It's a different beast. They're a predator, like we talked about earlier. But I was convicted. I literally felt a calling of God upon my heart to write clean fiction when I was done with Dissonance. I really felt that call to write clean Christian fiction, to be representative of who I am, where I am, why I am. And so while the setting is somewhat the same, granted there's a massive worldwide problem that has happened. There's a catastrophe that has happened, and what is our panacea? What are we going to do to get out of this? Well, I needed the stage to be similar, but what I didn't see myself doing from the start, because again, I'm a pantser, was setting this in an Aaron verse. So it is in the same universe as Dissonance. In fact, the alien invasion and the wars of the 40s is referenced in the end. People refer back. This book is set in 2113. They are referring back to the alien invasion that happened in the 20s and the wars of the 40s, which is a clear and direct reference to Dissonance Volume 1, 2, and 3, and then 4 as well. So I like that. I like that it's based in the same exact universe, and I like that it is a continuation of an already established story. So while the inspiration came out of a bit of a conviction about having used profanity and some macabre violence in the Dissonance series, and God impressing upon my heart to write clean Christian fiction, I did actually really want it to be a continuation of this same universe, because then the story is more cohesive. We'll also find there's a character that makes her way from Dissonance. It's Pastor Rosie. You're going to find her in virtually every one of my other books. She's my Tom Clancy Denton Voiles character. Or
Uh-huh.
I think it's John Grisham. Sorry, John Grisham has a character named Denton Voiles, who's in every book. And I wanted that character. I wanted Rosie to be that character. So she hops, man. She's a bunny, and she is in all of my other books.
Yeah, she's a good choice for that from reading book one for sure.
A lot of wisdom.
Right. So the end series is the like I'm struggling for the word for it, like Christian apocalypse fiction or revelations fiction. You mentioned the After the End series, the Left Behind series
Hmm.
as another similar series, and I've read some of that one as well. And it's what would the word for that be?
Yeah, post-apocalyptic end times fiction. Um,
End times. Yes, that's it.
yeah, things like that. It'd be a fairly accurate way to describe it.
Yeah, but you have a character near the start explaining that it's not following all of the things within Revelations,
Hmm.
and it looks like it is later on in the series. But I was curious whether that was a more why you would sort of veer away from that as a story choice instead of just going directly into it.
Yeah, because so the crux of the matter is that First John 2:18, I believe it is, says, "Even now many antichrists have come." This man, this primary antagonist in the end, his name is Emperor Nero. His formal legal name originally is Constantine Jedediah Goodfellow. Constantine means steadfast. Jedediah means loved of the Lord. Goodfellow means, Goodfellow. And so he took everyone by surprise by rebranding and saying, now that I'm in power, here's what I'm really about. And he rebrands as Emperor Nero and commences with the eradication of Christians in a second apocalypse. A second Holocaust. Now, yes, I believe it's who you're referring to as Swifty while he's teaching the kids in
Yep.
the end, Alpha, is teaching them that he is not the Antichrist, capital A. He's an Antichrist, little a. He just happens to hold all the cards. It's kind of like in the Matrix. They are guarding all the doors. They are holding all the keys. That's who he is. He believes he's the big kahuna. Delusions of grandeur is what it is. He wants to call out God and say, where's your God now, people? If you really worship this almighty God, where is he? How come he's not saving you? See, he doesn't exist. And, now I have to kill you. Again, Earth has come under siege, but this time it's by one of our own. And so the Gorgons have been exterminated. They've been long gone. Now we're still dealing with lack of balance, lack of harmony. We're dealing with nefarious elements from within, and this is where whereas Dissonance is far more post-apocalyptic, the end is far more dystopian. Dystopian has to usually do with a power struggle,
Yeah.
the haves and the have-nots, and so that's where this is far more dystopian.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's still society is still going on in the background. It's not seen a lot in Alpha, but there's references to it where there's still education, there's internet, there's traffic and other stuff like that. All of that's resurfaced after the Gorgons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, it's a different environment entirely, but it's one filled with high stakes, high dread, like the Gorgons, the Guardian robots that are mechanoids that Nero was pitching to the government to fight our wars in other countries. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of them off an assembly line, and unfortunately, this virus has killed off 50% of the population. So now we're in dire straits again, and we need somebody to protect us, to guide us through, to provide for us. And so we, in our desperation, elect Constantine Jedediah Goodfellow to president, to our eternal shame. We find out later that he's got an ulterior motive. He's still got all the codes and all the programming for those Guardian robots, who are guardians only of him, by the way. And so it's a very oxymoronic name, Guardian.
Yeah.
Christians are secretly branded under the guise of a census. They're branded by laser scan on the backs of their necks, lit up by their body heat and impossible to extinguish until you're, dead. Those guardians are trained to look for one thing, and that is that mark on the back of your neck. And if they find it and you don't recant, they're going to ask you, citizen, do you recant? And you don't recant, you're toast. You're dead.
Yeah, that a lot of those it seemed like allusions to the Book of Martyrs, where I think there were lots of similar stories with people and the original Nero as well.
Mhm.
Were you drawing some inspiration from that for those parts of the story?
No, I wasn't. Not really per se. And I mean, yeah, I hadn't read it, but I'm so inspired, and you'll find that so many of the fictional accounts, and there are gobs of end times or post-apocalyptic Christian fiction having to deal with revelation or tribulation or anything like that, they're all going to follow somewhat of a similar pattern. My premise is different. My the setting is different. The antagonist is different. The stakes are different, and I wanted it to be different, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's still some things that are in common, of course, like the virus. So we have pestilence, and there's war that's happening off camera with Nero conquering the world. The one that seemed more explicit to me was him trying to move the capital to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a sort of okay, this guy is trying to do the things in the Revelations.
Yeah.
So it seems like the character Nero believes he's the Antichrist and has to do these things.
Correct. Yeah, that's spot on. He actually believes, in his heart of hearts, heart of hardened hearts, that he is the big A Antichrist of Revelation, predicted, long before his own time, to rise from the east and to, enforce the mark, and people have to get the mark to buy and sell. Everything that you would read in Revelation. He hasn't done that yet, but he does know, he's cognizant on a surface level of what Revelation talks about the Antichrist. And so, in order to, he's trying to, bring about self-fulfilling prophecy. He's trying to say, listen, all of this is about me. And so in order for it to truly be about me, I have to follow this roadmap, as it were, laid out in front of him in Revelation in order to prove to the masses that I am, in fact, the Antichrist. Where he doesn't go about wearing a sweater that says or a label that says hi, I'm the Antichrist. It's a foregone conclusion by many that he either is or he wants to be. And so what he hasn't done, and the signs that are supposed to have taken place prior to the Antichrist rise, prior to the return of Christ, prior to the tribulation, the 7-year period mentioned in Scripture, there are so many things that have to take place that have not taken place as Scripture is foretold. So that's any good Bible believing Christian who has studied the Word and has looked for these signs is not seeing them having happened. So that's how they know he's not the capital A Antichrist. He's just a pretender. And those people are the most dangerous ones. The people who have delusions of grandeur, man, those people are dangerous.
Well, I think it's interesting compared to other like lowercase antichrists like Hitler or Genghis Khan, where they were not portraying themselves that way, compared to Nero, where he's like making himself into a deity and offering sacrifices to the day star, which I felt like was a reference to Lucifer. I'm not sure.
It is, yep.
Yeah. So he's more explicitly like, I am a Satanist and I want bad things to happen. It's just a very different take for a character to be overtly evil instead of, I guess, hiding it in some way.
Right. And the dichotomy happens when you see him portraying himself as benevolent, gracious, wise, loving, caring, because those are incongruent with the someone so nefarious, someone so evil and diabolical. The sad thing is that you'll always have sycophantic worshipers who sidle up to such a person, and they are blinded by lust for power, wanting to be on the right team, or the team that's winning, not right, like not morally right, but wanting to be on the winning team that holds all the cards. And so, Maximilian, the sycophantic high vassal of Nero, is one such person. He's been blinded. He is absolutely devoted to his lord, the God King, and he's absolutely, unflinchingly allegiant to Nero because he knows that Nero is his god. Um, and if it's not a knowledge basis, then at the very least, it's a hugely ingrained belief basis. You can't tell me anything other than Nero is my god type of belief. And that's so
Hmm.
dangerous. There were people that believed the same of Hitler, you know.
Yeah, yeah, there were. That's true. So you have three different point of view characters for this book. Are there more that show up later on in the series, or does it stick with the same three?
Well, there's definitely more characters that appear that are extraneous characters, but the primary three first person perspectives that you're introduced to, those carry the whole series. So in all three of the novels, it's told from Sage Maddox, Colonel Drexler's, and Maximilian's perspectives.
Okay, yeah. So it seemed like Sage was sort of the bigger one within the story from my perspective,
Mhm.
and maybe that's just me picking the young good male, going with that compared to the experienced guy and the villain.
Right.
The Maximilian evolves within the series, so he's not consistently a villain. But so I want to start with Sage for his character in that presentation, and I think this goes to what you were talking about before of having a book that's more like, what did you say before, for like good Christian fiction?
Clean Christian
You
fiction.
were called to write. Yes, thank you, clean Christian fiction, and I think that character and Drexler to an extent as well both embody that very well.
Yeah.
The Bible study meetings that he's having with Swifty and the other kids just feels very like, dude, I've been in that room.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Sage is, I wanted it to be dystopian. Dystopian is often associated with teenage characters, 13 to 18. Granted, most of these characters that are around Sage in his orbit are either 18, 17, 16, 15. There are extraneous adult characters around them, and one of those is Swifty. One of those is Andrea. One of them is Leona. One of them is Fritz. And they're male leaders that watch out for them, and help them survive as they try to evade. Because all of them are marked, except for Asher, who has actually cut out his mark. He's cut out the laser branding that is on his skin. And so there's a big giant gash on the back of his neck, which really only means one thing. I mean, why else would you cut out that mark? So you're just
Right.
just as guilty. But he's a kid, and he did it when he was younger, and he didn't know. But yeah, they're all the young characters are. I've been in that room as well, and they're all learning. They're all learning history, and education goes on even in the midst of hiding. Swifty has a heart of gold, wants all of his kids to be equipped, wants them to understand that if he was given a gun and he was tasked with walking right up to Nero and shooting him in the head, Swifty wouldn't do it, nor would he counsel it. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, is one of the counsels that he would give. And no one is beyond redemption. No one is beyond saving. That's another thing that he would counsel. So, and Sage is having a hard time with that. He wants revenge. He wants Nero to be done with.
Well, I think that's something that I did want to discuss, is that it seems like that core group of people is much more forgiving than I feel like most Christians are, where, it is something that you're called to do, like forgive someone, was it 70 times 7 times? And we could argue that Nero has used up that number if we want to put a specific number on it.
Right.
But I feel like Christian society still has like executions as part of it, part of justice, and that it's your responsibility to forgive someone but still stop them when they're doing something bad. And sometimes the only way to stop someone is to kill them. And I know that Sage evolves within that journey later on in the series from what I've read of it, but what was your handling for that when you were thinking of putting these characters into those situations?
Yeah, well, man, Clash of the Titans really must have impacted me far more than I care to admit, because I'm just now realizing that one of the best lines I've ever heard coming from a movie is also from Clash of the Titans. You know, it's where I got my Gorgons, but I love when Calibos, the deformed young prince, is struck down and turned into a creature. He is the demigod son of the goddess Thetis. And in the temple where she was being worshipped, they revere Cassiopeia higher than her. And out of anger, you know, her big gigantic statue rocks and her head breaks off the statue and falls to the ground and, you know, stares them down. Well, that statue also takes life and talks with Calibos later as well. And Calibos says, I demand justice. And Thetis looks at him square in the eye and says, justice or revenge? Because there's a huge difference. You know, there's a massive chasm of difference between justice and revenge. And this is the path inherently that Jet is set upon in Dissonance. He wants revenge. And he is constantly being counseled by Rosie and others that revenge is a one-way street. You know, revenge is a dish best served cold. Yes, Khan, in the Wrath of Khan himself counsels us, but it doesn't do anything for us. It just leaves us hollowed out, and there's no real sense of fulfillment in the end. You're going to find the next person to take revenge against. So Sage is similar to that, is he wants to take revenge for all these lives. He literally feels that he's been called by God to assassinate Nero, and that is revenge. Not justice, he wants revenge. It's clear from his passages. And Swifty has to curtail that. Others have to curtail that. We often, as Christians, we often confuse God's will with our own. And we say, this is God's will for me. Well, did you ask him? Did he sit down and say, my will for you is blah, blah, blah? And did he sound like James Earl Jones? I mean, like, what did he sound like? So,
is that a requirement or is that a disqualifier?
I don't know. I don't know. And I just know that I'm certainly not innocent of this as well. I'm not blameless. We often confuse God's will for our own. And so this is what Sage is doing, is he believes it's God's will for him to assassinate Nero. And that is not justice. That's revenge, plain and simple. Mm-hmm. So he does go on that journey. And he follows that path for quite some time. And you'll see what happens in the end. The end. Do you see what I did there? The end.
Oh, good one.
You'll find out at the end of the end. The end.
So I felt like Drexler was somewhat of a boring character compared to the other two, because I felt like Sage goes through a growth journey throughout the series that is just starting in the first one. Yeah. And same for Maximilian, though there is a much more dramatic shift in what he's doing within the first book. But Drexler feels like he's just kind of there to give you a broader perspective of what's happening within the country and the world and the universe, and he doesn't really go through a lot of growth at least in the first book.
Right.
Was your intention to have him be more of like this is a sort of callous way of putting it, but an exposition character?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's very fair to say that. However, there is a revelation about Colonel Drexler in Volume 1, Alpha, that you find out. And so that has direct implications on the other two characters. It has direct implications on the rest of the story, especially Volume 3, Omega, because he is no longer an impotent, impartial expository character. He the resolution of his story has direct implications on the resolution of Sage's story, of Maximilian's story, of Nero's story. Mm-hmm. And so you'll find that revelation, in Volume 1. I won't say where. But that's something that others have to grapple with. So he's no longer just this, here's what happened and here's what's going on now. He's also fighting a battle of having to hide, of knowing that he is responsible for this vast underground network called the Defiance. And you also find out how actually revered he is overseas when you get into Volume 2, which is Omicron. In Omicron, other characters are introduced that are international, and you're going to find that Colonel Drexler has far more weight all of a sudden than you perhaps gave him in Volume One.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
So the Defiance is a worldwide movement, not limited to the States. So, and Colonel Drexler heads up that Defiance.
Okay. Yeah, it felt like it was portrayed as mostly all of the action was happening within the United States within the first book. So
Right.
that's good to hear that it widens a bit later on.
Oh, it widens for sure. Very
Yeah, yeah.
wide.
So related to Drexler, so he helped develop the Guardians with Nero, and then realized, oh, Nero is bad and left. And I was trying to piece together the timeline for that because he sends his wife and his son away, which not just away. Like first he sends them into hiding,
Hmm.
and that feels like something that is extraordinarily paranoid to try and do that, unless there's some much more clear signal he gets from Nero that he needs to do that. And I felt like there wasn't described that way in the first book. So did you intend him to be like a paranoid character, or because it doesn't feel like he's written that way within the more modern parts?
No, it's I didn't write him that way. He is so obviously when you have a strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered type of person, which that's who Drexler is. He is the figurehead for the opposition to Nero, and Nero knows that. Nero absolutely knows who he is and what he can do, and it's clearly stated in Volume One that Drexler holds the keys to absolutely disarm Nero's entire mechanoid army through the back door,
Mm-hmm.
through accessing the kernel of the programming. So Drexler holds incredible power to hamstring Nero's operations, and he's been doing that back and forth. So you see him actually waging this silent war. And granted, those types of people. This is kind of like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, where yes, you see him on occasion, but he is a chess mover. He is moving pieces all of the time. And you don't often see all of those moves, but I'm pretty sure Gandalf was behind this. That is exactly what Drexler is. And so you do find more about his roles and his responsibilities on in Omicron. But yes, he did find out. It was kind of like that shock move where, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. This person that I trusted is a delusional psychopath, and he's got this control of all of these mechanoids, and he's really hell bent on destroying Christians. I've got to get my wife and son to safety. And so Drexler didn't do that until it was clear that Nero it was just plain bonkers and was masking it all of this time. Nero has declared war on Christianity, and not on the very ideology of it, but on Christians themselves, humans, killing off humans. And
Mm-hmm.
at that
Yeah.
point, that's when Drexler makes the decision to put his wife and son into hiding, because strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. The best way to get at Drexler is through his wife and son. Hold them hostage, threaten their lives. Drexler surrenders himself. You've got Drexler. That's a very common ploy. Is lure out your primary enemy through extortion, through threat of pain, through coercion, and so that's
Yeah.
why you put them in hiding for sure.
And the other component for Drexler is that yes, he can sort of secretly control the Guardians, and that, I mean, it explains some things that happen within the story. Like there's a point about facial recognition that's mentioned, and it seems like, oh, okay, there we go. So he's breaking them, and then Nero fixes them, and then breaks that, and then Drexler breaks them again. It seems like because the Guardians are so important to Nero, that he should fix that back door, so that Drexler can't keep getting into it.
Right.
But I also felt like, based off of the people that Nero surrounds himself with, that he's not necessarily surrounding himself with people that are competent enough to fix problems like that, and he is focusing much more on loyalty.
Yes.
So I I've kind of answered my own question here for why the why the robots keep getting hacked when they shouldn't be.
Right.
If this has been happening for 15, 16 years.
Yeah, well, so you're absolutely right. He surrounds himself. The Bible talks about in the end times, we'll gather around ourselves a host of people who will say what our itching ears want to hear. That's all Nero cares about. Is he wants this sycophantic worship, this adulation, unbridled adulation, and continued worship and reverence of him. That's what he wants. So while he has a power structure in place, and he's got different people in different stations manning those positions, and he's got this ecosystem all around him that is designed to do one thing, and that's keep Nero in power. Yes, he's not the most technologically bright. That's why he had Colonel Drexler, who was his partner. Thomas Drexler was his partner before all this. That's why he partnered with Thomas Drexler, and that's why Thomas Drexler knows more about all that equipment than Nero does. You also have to deal with the fact that with 50% of the population having been wiped out, a lot of the competent people went the way of the dogs with all of the non-competent people. So you've
Mm-hmm.
got less of a kitty of people to draw from all this time that are competent on either side. Fortunately, thank God, Drexler and his crew have plenty of the competent people working with them. And Drexler is much more militarily minded than Nero. Nero is ideologically minded. That works in Drexler's favor is this continued attempt to dismantle Nero's ideology structure, and shatter the foundations of the belief system in him. It'll rock his belief system and send ripples through all of his throngs of worshipers if we can really unveil to the world who he really is and what he really has done.
Mm-hmm. But maybe that answers another question, because I felt like if Drexler has like the ability to get into these robots and kind of tell them what to do, why not just tell them to go kill Nero and or capture whatever needs to be done? Then problem solved, and we can rebuild the world.
Sure. Yeah, well, this is the Guardians don't operate on the strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered programming. They have their own programming, independent. They're not programmed to worship Nero. So you kill Nero, it means nothing to them. And in fact, if you go, they're cold, unfeeling robots that simply operate on programming. Um, if you read through Volume 3, it's mentioned several times that the solution is not killing Nero. Nero must be brought to justice. Yes, he must be removed from power. Yes, but you basically avenge yourself against Nero, and by killing him, you're no better than Nero. He must be brought to trial. He must be brought to justice through legal means, and people need to see who he really is. He's not a god. He's not a god king. He's very much a man who can bleed. And people see that. Specific people at the end of Alpha see that, oh my gosh, he is a man. He can bleed.
Mm-hmm.
He is bleeding. What the heck? And it's world rocking for them. So that kind of thing is what needs to happen. On the other side of it, though, these Guardians, yes, there are some awesome things that happen in Volume 3, but the Guardians then become another problem that need to be addressed in programming. You can't just have them turn their turrets on Nero, because they're not programmed to do that. These guys are simply the kernel system exists in the programming, which allows Drexler to be able to get in and to prevent different things from happening, prevent the targeting of innocent civilians, prevent Nero's guns being used on bystanders, not to change the programming entirely and to kill off Nero, because that's the overriding message here: is this is revenge, not justice.
Okay, so he can turn off parts of their programming, but not turn it on.
Yeah, correct.
Like insert new parts.
But the threat exists that there are new Guardians being rolled out and new programming that's just coming around the corner. And so it kind of increases the urgency that we better act now before these new Guardians are rolled out that are independent of this current matrix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a sentence or two in the first book that alludes to that.
Mm-hmm.
One more question about the Guardians. They're portrayed as like dumb and easily fooled. in addition to the messing with him that Drexler is doing. So they're having a lot of false negatives where they aren't identifying someone as Christian when they theoretically should be.
Right.
I was curious if they ever had false positives the other way around. You know, like when you do a test, you can have, like, if it's actually something, but you detect it as not, it's a false negative. If someone is actually not, but you detect them as they are, that would be a false positive, where they think someone is Christian and then try to execute them or ask them to recant when they shouldn't.
Yeah, no, I think they're more sophisticated than that. Clearly, there's a mark on the back of their neck, and you find that the Defiance has come up with a solution called chokers that they wear to obscure that signal, to deflect the signal, so that it's not scannable by Guardians from up close or afar. And then on top of that, they have new technology that they have been mass producing in the background called patches. And the patches are going to be even more nondescript. They're going to be even more hard to detect. They'll blend right into the skin, and they'll cover that mark on your skin as well. But they'll be far more undetectable. So that technology exists. Are the Guardians dumb? Well, Charlie herself calls them dopes on occasion, because yes, they're kind of brute, lumbering beasts, and I didn't want to make them far too complicated. Like, I wanted them a little bit like Ed 209 in RoboCop, but with some aerial and some speed advantages over Ed 209. I didn't want to make them too complicated, because you have to give humanity at least some chance. You have to give them some fighting chance. Otherwise, it's just going to be an absolute annihilation, and the only person left is Nero and a couple 100,000 bots. And I didn't want that.
Yeah. And he needs his worshippers too. So.
And he needs his worshippers. Yeah.
Moving on to Maximilian. So I think your narration for this portrayed him as, because I was listening to the audiobook, as just really like disgusting and like unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already talked, like, a lot of what he's doing is connected to Nero's goals. So we've already kind of talked about that. And I talked about, like, the loyalty component, where Maximilian, in a lot of ways, seems like he's not really necessarily good at his job. I mean, there's still lots of Christians around. What are you doing wrong, buddy? Which plays back into the loyalty component. What I wanted to talk to you most about Maximilian is the way that you did the narration for the voice that he hears.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you did the narration for, like, Sage and Drexler, when they're recalling scripture, it is in their own voice is what they hear.
Right.
Where you applied a filter to Maximilian, which to me implied that he was actually hearing the voice of God. Was that your intention with that?
Well, Maximilian himself, his voice has no filter on it. When he hears the voice of God, that is a slight reverb and a lower kind of breathier tone that comes at him that way. So that effect, or that track, actually has a filter on it to employ that kind of cerebral approach. That's obviously Jesus isn't standing right here in front of him. But his own track, Maximilian's own natural way of speaking, that track has no FX on it other than the standard EQ.
I guess my intention is that it seems, because you applied that filter to just the scripture component, not to, like, his own, like, internal voice when we hear him, like, talking to himself within the book.
Yeah.
That it sends a message that he's, instead of where you and I can feel like we're unsure when God is speaking to us and calling us to do things, like you'd mentioned earlier, but within his, at least within the narrator's conception of what we're experiencing, that message is actually God, like sending a thought into his head through, however that happens.
Yeah, no, that was definitely intentional. Anytime Jesus's voice pokes through, or God's voice pokes through and punctuates the dreary monotony that these people live in, Maximilian included, it's all gaudy and overdone and, make-upified and sincerely just sycophantic is the perfect word to use of him, because he almost, I needed him to be a little bit of a cross between he's almost like a Ku Klux Klan member with the pointy hat and just the robes and
Uh-huh.
the gaudiness, but I really wanted him to have the gaudy nature of a Skeksis in the Dark Crystal. That was the vision that I got in my head for all these people. Is they're human for sure, but very gaudy and very just kind of overdone and over, like melodramatic behavior and oh my lord, dainty ways of speaking and long nails and makeup. Just blech.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a very like gay stereotype for how you were portraying them.
Well, and all of them might sound a little bit to that way. Certainly didn't mean to err that way, but overall, this complete attention to absolute worship of everything Nero and standing on that high ground, or desiring to stand on that high ground with him. But when the voice of Jesus or God pokes through all of that, it's meant to stand in stark contrast to who and how you hear any of these characters, because Jesus still reigns. God still exists. There is this higher being that sees everything that's happening down here, and he knows, and he watches, and he cares. And so it needed to be that still small voice that you hear about in Scripture. I'm actually going to look that up. Still small voice. First Kings, Elijah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was First Kings where Elijah was talking about it.
Okay.
Elijah's on the mountaintop, and God comes in this great wind, and then like I think it's an earthquake and a fire, but God's not in any of those voices. He's in a still small voice, and that's basically just this gentle prompting from above that is meant to distinguish between our stark, crazy-voiced Maximilian, our young, driven but confused voice of Sage, and our war-weary and weathered voice of Drexler. So you hear him all stand in contrast to that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation, where that's how he hears it in his own head, and we don't necessarily know why.
Yeah, well, to be clear, he's not hearing that in his head. He's actually hearing that it is a tangible voice that is being uttered around him, that he's hearing audibly with his ears. Otherwise, you could chalk it up to a case of, he's suffering some kind of dementia, or he's paranoid delusional, or he's schizophrenic, and it's none of those things. He's very much a person caught up in the middle of this pursuit of all things Nero, and it takes a voice, a real live voice, to shake him out of that. That makes sense?
Yeah, and I think that some saints experienced the same thing, where they heard a voice that only they could hear. I know that Joan of Arc experienced that. I don't know if, not familiar with many other saint stories, but I know that she experienced something that was similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's within the established facts that we know.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about how other religions and atheism are portrayed within the book, and probably the broader series.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that part of it is just that, okay, they're not the focus because this is clean Christian fiction, and we're not going to talk much about like Jews, Muslims, or other religions besides the Abrahamic ones. But you did mention that other Jews and Muslims were helping the Christians, which is something that we have seen in other historical contexts as well.
Right.
Where do you see them fitting within the setting?
Well, ultimately, Nero's goal is to draw out God, is basically to question God and cause people to question their faith in God as well, to disprove him publicly and to say, where's your God now? All of you are dying. Your God hasn't rescued you. You are in dire straits. Where's your God now? If he really cares, where is he? Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's, blah, blah. Like the priest of Baal taunted Elijah, and Elijah taunted them back. But, maybe where's your God now? Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's relieving himself.
There's that joke of like, I slept like God during the Holocaust.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is told from a Christian perspective, and Christians, as particularly Jesus, is a firebrand in religion because it's really one of the only people, if not the only person, to say, "I am the way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." It's very exclusionary. That is an approach that basically renders, in his mind and in his followers' ears, hearts, and minds, renders every other religion moot. Renders God as the only way, Jesus as the only way. So yes, it is told from the perspective of Christian followers. However, Nero is not taunting and focusing purely on Jesus. Christian means Christ one. Christ is Jesus. Christ is the Messiah. So obviously he's got a bone to pick with Christians more than anything else because they're the ones who will name the name of Jesus. Jews, no, Jews don't, unless they are Messianic Judaists who believe in Jesus as the fulfillment of the Messianic prophecies. He's not bothering with them. But there is still the issue of all these religions that believe in a God. So Protestants, Muslims believe in a God. They believe in Allah. Jews believe in Jehovah. Messianic Jews believe in Yeshua, Jesus. And then you've got, all the various subsects of religion as well. You've got, Mormons who believe in God, but, there's Joseph Smith in there as well, who's a prophet. Or any other religion that claims devotion to a God, Nero is going to take issue with. And as the God, self-appointed God King, quote unquote, he wants all of that worship to himself. He doesn't want any other deity worshipped, so he's trying to purge that. But his particular focus has been, and making no bones about having been, against Christians.
Okay, so from Nero's perspective, it's sort of I'll get to you later, as a secret is your intention.
Sure, yeah, that's a fair thing to say.
Okay. There's another component of this that I feel like is from Sage's perspective, where he seems to be equating morality and Christian faith when they're not necessarily the same thing. Like there's plenty of examples in history, in the Book of Martyrs, going back to that, of gentile people providing aid and comfort to Christians that are being persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
And Iris is a decent example of that, but she's not explicitly like atheist. She's more aligns with like agnostic, I would think, from
Correct.
The way she's presented.
Correct.
And honestly, it feels like there's no atheist people in the book at all. Because Nero still seems to believe in God, but have a poor view of him.
Well, you could say that all of the people who have pledged their undying loyalty to Nero are atheist. They, in the strictest sense of the word, for an actual theist persona, they have decided to interpret Nero as being the focus of their theism. So all of those people have renounced, true belief in God for a substitute. And that's often what Satan masquerades as an angel of light. We're like, ooh, ah. It's kind of like Jeff Goldblum's phrase in Jurassic Park. That's how it starts. Ooh, ah, and then later there's running and screaming. And it's just that's what we do. We think, hey, there's a cool thing, and this is not the thing that we think it's the thing that we think it is. But it ends up not being, and then there's panic afterwards, and that's certainly what's happening to Maximilian.
Yeah. I guess we've touched on most of the points I wanted to get to for like trying to understand the series and your intentions with it. And I feel like The End and Dissonance have very, very similar themes for the threats that people are interacting with. It's just that within The End, the threats can be spoken to and are human,
right,
or robotic, but can still be spoken to. I'm not sure that within a role-playing context that you would even need like a different set of rules to play either one. You could use the same rules to play both of them, right, because they're so similar in their themes and the like world that the main characters would be experiencing, where they have to like, be in hiding and go out and get supplies and dodge evil monsters that are trying to kill them,
Mm-hmm.
and work on trying to come up with a solution to the evil monsters, whether they're, anti-Christian robots or freaky squid aliens.
Yeah.
So when we discussed that previously at the end of like the little dissonance section, I don't think there's anything that new that needs to be covered here necessarily, beyond that the end is more of a focus on faith. So you might want to bring that more explicitly into the rules compared to dissonance, which faith, while there, is not a component that interacts with what the Gorgons are doing.
Right. Yeah, well, either way, both stories deal with a dual deposition, and that is getting rid of the deposing the Gorgons of their rule in Dissonance, and then deposing Jean Graham of her rule, because she's just become a nefarious character she is the very epitome of living in dissonance, as we should all be working together. And then in the end, I wanted it more stark, where you've got all these robots. Yes. You have to get rid of Nero. That's clear from the very beginning. But even if you do that, that doesn't do anything for the Guardians. The Guardian robots still are going to operate on their programming. Their basic, 110, line 110, kill Christians, line 120, go to line 10 programming.
Right.
They're cyclical that way. And so they're just going to run around and still kill Christians. So you've got to deal with this other threat as well, both times. I really like that dual threat. Is this solves one thing, but it doesn't solve everything.
Well, cool. Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And normally I end by asking people what DMing advice they have, but I feel like that might not apply as well when I ask you, because you have never played, or, well, I've played once, but wouldn't really have anything in that respect. I guess, do you have any writing advice that you want to give people?
Well, yeah, I would say it's not so much writing advice as much as it is advice for being a writer and surviving as a writer. I was given some fantastic advice by a former voiceover casting agent / entrepreneur that really rocked my world as a voiceover artist, but I find it utterly translatable as an author, and I find it indispensable as a creative. The advice is this. It's a quote that I took from her, where she said, "Someone's endorsement of you, or lack thereof, has very little to do with your trajectory." I think that quote is absolutely indispensable if you're going to pursue authoring, because we want people to buy our books. We want people to fall in love with our stories. We want people to tell other people. We want them to leave positive reviews. We crave that affirmation of our story that we worked so hard on. And when we don't get it, it's sapping. It hurts our heart. But we have to remember that someone's endorsement of us or our books, or lack thereof, has very little to do with our trajectory. Our trajectory as a writer is forward, period. Write. We need to write for ourselves. We need to write stories that we love. And then someday, if, God allows someone to catch wind of this, or an influencer takes it and picks it up and just tells everyone, you got to get this, then that would be awesome if someone would be able to take the ball and run with it. But we have to not hang our hat on that affirmation. We have to move on and just keep writing for us.
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard that advice before, and it's guided what I'm doing as well. Like, yeah, you could do something that feels like, this will be successful, but if it's inauthentic, people will pick up on that, and it won't really be successful.
Right. Yeah, it's just so easy as a creative. You wrap a present up, you put it out there, you want people to unwrap it and to fall in love with it and to go, oh, best present ever. The fact that they don't, or they don't do it in droves, that's okay. Don't take that as a personal rejection. It's just keep writing, keep putting the presents out there.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate it. This was a great interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it too.
Before we finish up today, I wanted to talk about the more RPG angle on what Aaron was presenting. Aaron's not a RPG player or game master, so I couldn't really talk about this part of what he was doing in as much detail as I'd like with him. So I wanted to present it just as a single narration from me for the systems that I think would fit for Dissonance and the End. And I think you could probably use the same system for both. Like I said in the main interview, there's a lot of overlap in the themes and the tone for what they're presenting, and you wouldn't really need to go outside of that. My mind first went to Apocalypse World because it's about apocalypses, and these are about like apocalypses as well. But I don't think that would actually fit that well because it has a lot of supernatural elements to it that are not in Aaron's stories. They're much more grounded. There might be a Powered by the Apocalypse system that would work, but I could not find one that I thought fit for this type of story. Maybe one needs to be designed. Next, I looked at Twilight 2000, and it might work, but I don't know as much about it. It's a nuclear war fallout kind of situation, between the US and Russia. It's an older system, but I don't know enough about it to recommend it. Maybe other people would know if it would fit based off of what we've discussed. Next, I went to GURPS, which, is a universal system, so it should work with a lot of settings. And it's a more grounded system as well from my look at it and my playing of it a long time ago. But GURPS runs into the usual problem that you need to have a lot of guidance and coordination between the players and the GM to make sure it works. And that's difficult to get that balance in the right place, has been my experience. The system that I think would work best is probably Ashes Without Number. It has all the right tools to fit the setting of Dissonance, and it's intended to be modular, so you can leave out the more supernatural elements and like the fallout radiation rules. You just don't use those. You use the ones that are more relevant for the situation, would be aliens or robots, and like trying to scavenge for supplies, whatever you want to have the setting and the experience for the players be. I also think something like Spire or Blades in the Dark might work if you removed the magic rules. Spire, because it's about resistance against a fascist government, works better for the end, and same for Blades in the Dark, because that's more like you're trying to move around a totalitarian regime. So both of those function better for the end, and I don't think they would work that well for Dissonance. So if I was going to do it, I would do Ashes Without Number for Dissonance. You could still use that for the end as well. And I would use Spire or Blades in the Dark, but modified. And there might be another Fortune of the Dark system that would work better than those, that removes the magic elements for the end. But those are my recommendations. Do with them what you will. This episode was sponsored by Darren. Thank you, Darren. And if you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that would be joining our Discord and trying to talk with other people about the show, or telling your friends about the show. And thank you for listening.